This is Coder Radio, episode 18 for October 8th, 2012. Hi everyone, you're listening to Coder Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
Top of the morning to you, Chris.
Good afternoon to you, sir. How are you doing this fine week?
I'm quite well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to see what you have in store for us, because I believe you've been chewing on this topic for the better part of the week. So I'm curious what you have in store.
Fair enough. But let's start, as is our custom, with the feedback.
All right, sir. What is our first email this week?
So, someone named Jay seems a bit distressed. He writes in asking me how developers deal with two separate issues. The pathetic Android update cycle.
Ouch, harsh. Wow, right out of the gate.
Terms, not
wow,
his.
That's harsh right out of the gate. Listen to you.
And the carriers and OEMs skinning Android. So I'll answer it backwards. About 99.99% of the times, the skinning thing doesn't really matter for developers because it shouldn't change the API. Yeah. You could possibly. I'll give you a great example. Sony a while back sent me one of their Xperia phones to mess around with. It was the one that had the joystick. I don't know if you're familiar with this, Chris.
Oh yeah. The one that's supposed to be like a a portable PlayStation portable crossover device.
It was the first beta model of it, so
what
it was
like
called? Not the Vita. That's the actual console. I have it on my desk too. I don't know the damn name.
Yeah. Okay. It was an interesting idea though.
Xperia Play.
Xperia Play.
That's the name of the line. I don't know what the model number is, but it was the first. It was like the alpha one. It looked weird, and they sent me a German version here, which was challenging. Setting it up was hard. Anyway, that phone actually has different APIs. So it has the Android APIs and the Sony PlayStation APIs. So Jay, if you end up targeting some of the Sony APIs, you're in trouble. Because obviously it won't work on other phones. But if you just stick with the stock Android SDK, you're okay.
I think I found a not quite the one you're talking about, but one along the lines.
I think that's a newer one.
Yeah. And it's an interesting concept. What did you think of that?
I'm told that the newer versions are a bit better. The version I had some serious issues with the joystick and accuracy and sensitivity. Oh,
that's a bummer.
So
kind of the point.
Right, because if you were targeting this phone, you were specifically targeting this phone.
Yeah.
I've been kind of brainstorming a game project for a long time, and they sent me this phone anyway, so I was like, all right, let's see how it would run. Remember, and what they sent me was not like a release version. I'm told that the one that actually got released and the subsequent models are significantly better.
Sure. What about the updates?
So that is a problem, right? There are ways around it, but generally speaking, if you go below like 2.3, you're in for a world of pain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're lucky in that most people are on 2.3 at this point.
Right. I was checking if I could find the stats. In fact, if I recall, at 2.3 is like on 70%. Oh, God, I could be getting this wrong, but it's like on 2.3 is like on 70% of the devices. And,
high enough to care about 2.2. I know that.
Yeah, oh, wait, here we go. Okay. Oh boy, I see. No, I'm glad I looked it up because it's changed quite a bit. 55% are on 2.3. So you got to figure over half. Just barely over half are on Gingerbread. And then the other biggest market share is 23, nearly 24% are in Ice Cream Sandwich.
Right, so if you target 2.3, you're okay for everything above it.
Right, yeah, except for then you don't get advantages that are in Ice Cream Sandwich specifically. Right?
And that's the challenge with any platform, though. If you want to support older, for lack of a better term, versions, you can't have the new shiny in the new version, right? So it's the same thing on the iOS side. It's the same thing on Windows. It's the same thing everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can have checks in your code that differentiate, but it's probably more work than it's worth.
Did you see the rumor about an LG Nexus phone with Android 4.4 or something like that on there?
No, I did not.
Yeah, that was the rumor, although it's been debunked by either somebody at Google or LG this morning. But over the weekend, it looked like people were saying that LG and Google were going to do a Nexus phone deal, and they were going to ship a new version of Jelly Bean at the end of, or Jelly Bean's replacement, I guess it would be at the end of November.
Really?
Yeah, but come on, that's just crazy, right?
It seems real fast. I mean, it's beside Jay's point.
And I know I belabor this too often and more than I should, but when I look at these numbers, you look at Gingerbread, version 2.3 came out how long ago?
Oh, it's been some time. It's been
It's
been 2 years already.
And what, is half of the iOS ecosystem's already on iOS 6?
iOS 6 has had tremendous adoption, yeah.
So it's an interesting challenge that they're up against, and I think as time goes on, this problem will sort of nullify out, right? Won't you think, as Android kind of matures and becomes stable?
Well, that's interesting, because at the end of his email, Jay did ask why Google doesn't do what Apple does. And the reason is that it would be hard, right? Apple controls the software. Apple, worst case scenario, they can update you via iTunes. Also, Apple has a better negotiating relationship with carriers, or at least they did when they made these deals. Google would have to negotiate with all the OEMs and the carriers, which is a challenge.
But I don't even know if that's really necessary. I mean, the reason, part of this fragmentation comes from the fact that this operating system's only 5-6 years old, that has been in the public. And so, when an operating system's 15 years old, it just doesn't have these problems anymore. I mean, look at Windows now, right? I mean, it's much slower, but earlier, well, it's not quite a good equivalent. But you know what I'm saying is, as the platform stabilizes and it gets feature mature, this might not be so much of a problem.
No, fragmentation is always going to be a problem. I mean, as long as the carriers can modify Android and they can do their, the color saturation is different from phone to phone.
Yeah, that is sort of a pretty big variable, isn't it?
Now, a lot of times it doesn't matter, but if you have a client who's more design-oriented, that's a big problem. Fragmentation in some form is going to be an issue, but it's just the way it is. I mean, you have to deal with it just like you would on any platform. In terms of Google being able to fix it, unless they forbade, any kind of modifications to the Android, and they dictated, somewhat like Microsoft does, what kind of screens you have to use, I don't see a solution to those problems.
Well, what about like Cheese Bacon in the chat room's bringing up? Is it's kind of like the Nexus line. They're sort of, you're guaranteed to be pretty close to the Google stock experience. Those devices sell very well. Those devices are reviewed very well, and I think we've seen some reports that people on those types of devices in the Samsung Galaxies and those types of higher-end phones spend more money like iPhone users, so it's almost like those are just the ones we're targeting anyways. What about that philosophy? Is that flawed?
It's not flawed, but those tend to be the higher-end, more costly devices, at least when they're released. So it's fine if you only care about those users, but if you still want to be able to target, Joe consumer who goes in and gets the Android phone because it's only $50 or because it's free, you still have to think about the fragmentation issue. Now, I do wonder if Google's not releasing all these Nexus devices as kind of a way to shame the OEMs and to say, well, our phones are this good, yours must be on par or better. Kind of like what I feel Microsoft is doing with the Slate, right?
Slate.
Well, no, not the Slate, whatever they call it.
Surface.
The Surface. What is the Slate? Those are the old ones.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, now that the Nexus 7 exists, selling a product that's patently inferior to it at a higher or the same price point would be hard.
Yes.
I mean, that's a challenge. And to be fair,
they do set a bar, yeah.
In my opinion, the best Android phone right now is not a Nexus phone. It's the Samsung S3.
Right, of course.
So, obviously, or at least to some extent, Google's idea of releasing these phones and having them be the reference design or perhaps just the target is working to a point. But then again, I mean, Android's a big ecosystem, and iOS even has this now too. There is a lower end iOS market because the 4 is basically free if you get a carrier contract.
Right, and that's not as far as what is, it's not that constraining for developers to target. They have a pretty good situation there.
Pretty good, but it's becoming a little more fragmented every year. It's not the same as Android. It's not to the same extent.
Oh, sure, yeah.
This is just what happens as platforms grow.
Right, they introduce new screen sizes, introduce Retina resolutions, all these things, quote-unquote, add fragmentation.
So it's, Jay, to your point, I don't think Google is going to wave the hammer of Thor and say, no, you will deliver this much RAM, this type of screen, this resolution, in this version of Android. But if they continue to release these very nice devices, just as Samsung has done, the manufacturers are going to have to up their game.
We'll see. I would like to see the new competitive aspect to Android devices be how fast they get updates. I would love that to be a bullet point on the box. Receives updates frequently.
I don't think the problem is it would confuse a lot of consumers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they'll never really. But I mean, we should get off this point because I think we've talked about it several times.
Okay. All right. Should we do Carlo's email?
Go for it.
Okay. Well, so Carlo wrote into the show, and he writes, listening to your focus show this week, that was last week's episode, and you were talking about the mobile space, software being pretty, etc. I couldn't agree with you more. When Canonical first demoed Ubuntu for Android, I was super excited, but I haven't yet seen it implemented. Since I was hoping to see Microsoft do this, especially with Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8, I want to get rid of my home computer and just hook up my phone/tablet up to a monitor to get some real work done. What an interesting concept. So what do you think of this, Mr. Dominic? Now, the bad news here is we really haven't seen much from Canonical. They were using and demoing an Atrix, and they showed some really cool demos of basically a smartphone that you put into a dock, and when it's connected to the dock, it loads a full Ubuntu 11-something environment, and you can use it, and you can share text messages with the phone, you can share contacts between the phone and the Linux operating system, and they've demoed it several times. But see, they were hoping that in mid-2012, by the end of 2012, somebody would be shipping with it. And they were sort of using the same technology that Motorola demoed with their webtop, with the Atrix, which Google has now killed as part of their acquisition of Motorola. Google canceled that project.
Yeah, so I think Carlos is taking what I said in a very different context, which is okay. I didn't expect things to go a different way with hardware. I was talking purely about software, so about the applications we write. Having said that, he does raise an interesting idea. Our phones are very powerful. Our iPads, our Nexuses are, what do they have, like a gig of RAM? Which is pretty good. My first computer had a lot less than that. So you could, in theory, want something like this. I personally don't, because I feel like a phone is much more likely to be damaged or destroyed. And I don't know if I'd want that to be my workstation. See, it's a tough thing, because also, Canonical doing something is a little different than, say, Microsoft doing it. Because Canonical doesn't have the weight in the hardware industry to just push it out or to force it. Canonical doesn't have stores. Canonical doesn't have a relationship with Best Buy or whatever your big box retailer of choice is. Now, having said that, he did mention Microsoft doing it. I kind of think that's what the point of those Intel tablets are. Wouldn't you agree, Chris?
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of the idea. They're just not plugging it into a bigger monitor. And no one's seen these tablets yet in the wild, but I'm pretty sure you can do that. I would be surprised if you can't.
Yeah, I'm sure, and most of them will have HDMI out, so you could even hook them up to a larger display.
I mean, there's text editors on my iPad that if I wanted to, I could AirPlay them to my TV and have a more powerful computer than I had for most of my life.
Yeah, and I'm surprised at how immediate the AirPlay mirroring is when you figure there's a chip in there doing H.264 encoding and then transmitting it wirelessly, and then another chip on another and decoding it and displaying it. And it still seems very responsive.
Yeah, it works very well. It's certainly a different model than the, plug in your phone to a special dock that hooks to your monitor. and switch to an entirely different desktop, right? Because that's how these Ubuntu phones work. They're Android until you plug them into the dock, and then they're Ubuntu.
Right. Same with the Motorola Atrix. In fact, you remember the Atrix? You could even get it with a laptop stand that then gave it extra battery life and a big screen and a keyboard and all that.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, Carlos. I just, I wouldn't want this, and I don't know who would, because I don't think many power users would go for this as their main workstation. You know what I mean? They'd probably buy a laptop anyway.
Yeah.
Or a full-blown desktop in Chris's case.
I could see business users, though. You have the smartphone, it fits in your pocket, and then you have this lightweight laptop dock or something like that, that in a real pinch, like you have an emergency code fix you need to do, or you have in my case, you have a machine you need to SSH into and fix something just really fast. And remember, this thing would also use the internal wireless of the smart device. So there's, I could see like some business case uses where there's the executive that always needs to be fully connected. But yeah, as general consumers, I don't see it just yet. It's still it seems like quite a few years off.
And in the enterprise space, if I was asked to deploy this, I would probably have some concerns regarding security, right? Because now that it's a smartphone and a computer, it has extra attack vectors that either wouldn't have. I mean, Ubuntu's more solid than, say, Windows would be, but I could see a future where maybe this does happen with Windows. Or even still Android. How many malware apps are there on the store that Google keeps having to clean up?
I don't know. I think that's more overplayed by virus manufacturers than...
Maybe. I mean, even without that, there's still you dropped your phone in water and didn't save your data to a cloud system.
Right.
So it just seems like an extra point.
Then you lose your smartphone and your desktop.
But yeah, so Carlos, it's you may be right, and we may all be plugging our phones into our workstations, but I don't see it for myself, and I can't speak for Chris, but.
Yeah, I don't really, unless it's for a pinch, And like RenX99 is pointing out in the chat room, would it even be lighter than an Ultrabook at that point? Because it's got a full battery in there. It might not be. And if that little laptop stand accessory thing isn't lighter and have longer battery life than an Ultrabook, I just really don't see it winning at that point. Because then might as well just carry an Ultrabook.
Yeah, why not get an XPS 13 or something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So moving on, Isaac asks if I'm going to talk about TypeScript. You're correct. Okay, so moving right along. So Charles wrote in with quite a bit of information for me, but I'm just going to go over the most important point. Right. So last week someone asked about Haskell. I wasn't sure where exactly it's being used. In fact, it's being used, as I thought, in banking, but also apparently it's pretty widely used anywhere there's large data or even small data. It's becoming more and more popular, he says, and he recommends anyone interested give it a shot.
Right on.
So again, I can't speak too much to Haskell, but go for it. The great Charles agrees. Charles Xavier. All right, so Matt shared with me an article about Adobe that I apparently failed to link into the notes.
No, what was the story?
But that's okay. The title is Has Adobe Gotten Its Mojo Back?
Oh my gosh. God, I hate these types of stories.
No, that's what I thought too when he sent it to me.
Yeah, okay.
So then I went and I looked at the article, I read it, and then I went and followed the links at the very good article, by the way. You should find it.
Okay, I found it. I'll link to it in the show notes.
Their Edge line of tools, now the more developer-focused tools, are actually pretty interesting. So simultaneous JavaScript and HTML editing with rendering in like a separate pane. A lot of little things, JavaScript code completion. It's just a very nice JavaScript editor that adds some of the visual design elements that folks might be used to from, say, a Dreamweaver or a Flash builder into an HTML5 optimized workflow.
Oh, okay. So they're kind of they're sort of embracing that and saying, oh, well, maybe Flash isn't what everybody's going to use.
Well, remember, Adobe's biggest moneymaker is tools, not actually platforms.
Yeah, I've always said that. Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense that they would want to dominate this HTML5 driven future.
Geez, this demo they're showing is pretty demo drool worthy here.
Yeah. Now it's in beta. I did play with some of the tools. They're very nice. If you're, I'm kind of stuck in my ways. Sublime text, but
getting to be an old man, dude.
Yeah, I could see a reason to use this if you're really concerned with like layout.
Yeah, now think about where this really works is some app websites really, 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 really pay attention to the look of their website, so that way it sort of blends in with the look of the app and things like that, right? And this could be a way you could sort of tweak that and make that actually happen, I would think, if you were to have access to these tools once they come out.
Yeah, if anything, assuming the code generation is good, using the visual designer to do a basic layout, have it generate the code for you, and then you quote fix it, might be a time saver.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you can't outsource that, if you can't get somebody to do that, then
right.
Then, yeah.
I mean, it's hard to judge because it's not fair to say if it's any good or not, only because it's in beta.
Right.
And the demos they show are, as Renex in the chat's pointing out, are by Adobe engineers. So obviously, it's like when they show Siri.
Oh, look at Rikai, found it right away. Look at him.
Yeah, look at that. I would say if you're more on the design side and you're missing your Flash builder, give it a go. I mean, it's free during the beta. Now the question is, how much are they going to charge?
Yeah, that is always the good question with Adobe, isn't it?
How much is this going to cost us? But yeah, give it a shot. So another Matt, or possibly the same Matt.
I got a lot of Matts out there.
I think it might be the same guy.
Matt and Mikes. We got a lot of Matt and Mikes.
We do, don't we?
Yeah.
He's working on an iOS app, and he has a little bit of a problem.
Uh-oh.
His app is going to rely on a server backend, presumably a database and some kind of API. Right, so just a basic backend. However, he's thinking of giving the app for free and then charging a 99-cent, quote, upgrade for the backend service. He's concerned about paying for the hosting costs of the service over time on that 99-cent per user. So that's bottom line. That's the basic question. Matt, you should be concerned, right? So you have to figure out, you're always going to have to bring in more revenue if you have a continuing cost. So one 99-cent sale over the lifetime of the app, if someone uses the app for a year, you're going to lose money. If I were you, I would consider the least expensive hosting options possible for what you're doing. I would also consider, as Pop in the chat is suggesting, a monthly fee. Perhaps make your service a subscription. Or you raise the price. This is a tough problem. There's no surefire solutions. The way the freemium games and freemium apps do it is they have multiple in-app purchases that expire, so people keep spending money. So they keep the revenue coming. Huh. But just having one unlock purchase is not a good idea, which he seems to understand in his email.
What if you figured, gosh, it'd be hard, but what about an in-app purchase of like $2.99 or something? You figure, okay, this is going to cover this user for a year. And because here's the thing, if you got 1,000 users to spend $1.99 to buy service for a year, it is very likely 200 to 300 of those users will drop off at some point, and they will have already paid, and they will essentially paid some of your overhead. Do you think? Because you could actually have people that pay and then quit using it.
Right, but I can't realistically put a number because I don't know what his.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, the number I'm just tossing out there. Yeah. I think 99 cents is probably too low. If he's not going to charge an ongoing, that's just bottom line. If he's not charging an ongoing fee, there's nothing. I mean, unless he gets 100,000 to 1 million people paying him 99 cents, that's just not going to do it. And I would say, yeah, go as cheap as possible, but don't sacrifice performance, because if it's a premium service that people are paying money for, it needs to perform that way. It can't be an underperformer. It can't be a...
Yeah, when I say cheap, I don't mean, go to Joe Blow hosting company. I'm thinking, do you really need EC2? Can you get away with a VPS from, say, GoDaddy?
Oh, yeah, totally do that. Do that, yeah. Definitely, yeah. Don't do anything that has an hourly fee associated with it.
Right, because your costs will start low. Actually, EC2 they might not. They're kind of pricey.
EC2 has like a low end freebie for a year.
It's really low end though.
Yeah.
If he has any modicum of success, he's going to hit it.
Yeah.
Or his performance. The worst thing you can do, Matt, is have the server crash while the app is live, because those 1 stars will tank your app.
This is a really interesting challenge that I think I don't think can be appreciated, how many developers are probably actually struggling with this type of stuff. And this is part of what Apple tries to solve with iCloud. If you just need simple data storage, right? And Google tries to solve the same problem. And I think to an extent that helps, but if you really want to get fancy, I think the first big example I go to is Marco Arment of Instapaper, because he has what is not only, he's like, what is it, like a $5 app in the App Store to begin with, so that's kind of high for an app, and then he's got an optional subscription service. I don't think it's very expensive. I'll go see if I can look it up.
I think it's like $2 a month. And what actually you bring up Instapaper, I believe on a recent episode of Build and Analyze, he mentioned his server hosting costs are like $11,000 a month.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Right. So if you do well, as he has, you're going to need to scale. And your costs are going to be very high. So you need to keep revenue coming in, right? That one-shot purchase is not going to be enough.
So what Instapaper does, and I don't quite understand what the subscription gets you. It gets, so it's $1 a month, and he builds it at 3-month intervals, and it says it gets you search ability to search all the articles, higher Kindle article limits, third-party Instapaper API apps, higher RSS feed limits. So he's basically made some bennies, right? So he gets some. You get a few bennies if you pay for it, and you cover the server costs. So maybe what you could do is maybe you could look at what do you need the server for, and if you can isolate that stuff out and then just attribute a cost to that, that might be the way to go.
Yeah, but again, with these low margin, low cost transactions, you're going to really have to sit down with the spreadsheet and do some math. Because one thing that's not going to work is coming in at 99 cents and having to raise your price. Better to start higher and go lower.
Raising your price doesn't put you on any charts, and all those charts are rigged so that you only show up when you lower your price.
Yeah, it's not. Not only that, people get annoyed. It would be. I hate to say it, but you're going to have to spend some time in Excel or in Google Docs. Figure it out. You're
going to have to figure out what you're going to do for your server hosting, and then you're going to have to figure out what that cost is going to break down. And
one other metric is you may not make money. I hate to say it, but the truth is I have more failed projects in terms of first-party apps that I've delivered and killed than successes.
So you say plan for the app not to make money?
Yeah, how much money are you basically have a dollar amount that you're willing to lose.
Right. And don't get into like some server beach contract for a year for a dedicated host.
And then kill it.
Right.
I mean, if you've only made $50 on the app and you spent like $5,000 on hosting, time to walk away.
That could be where something like a GoDaddy VPS is your lowest risk entry point. It's one of the cheapest ways to get a VPS, and you can turn it off when you're done. And same with the Amazon freebie. For testing, I'd say go Amazon freebie EC2, just for testing. Just to kind of see and get some ideas. But yeah, I wouldn't say use it. I wouldn't use it production because that cost can go so fast.
And don't be discouraged. I mean, this is part of the game, right?
Yep.
This is what it is. One thing I like about Code Journal is it's all client side. So, also think about what are the things you're doing on the server? Could they be done on the client? Is there a particular reason you're doing it on the server? If you're just storing data, you might want to look at iCloud since you're doing an iOS app. Maybe you can leverage iCloud. Maybe you can leverage Dropbox. There may be ways where you can use the user's storage that they've paid for rather than your own.
Yeah, that could be a great feature for users. Love that.
If you really think you need a full-blown RESTful API, you're going to have to bite the bullet. But, best of luck, Matt.
Good luck, Matt. All right, well, before we get on to the hoopla of the week, I have a plug I'd like to make real quick. You cool with that?
I'm always cool.
All right, well, I'll plug away now. You folks out there know Coder Radio doesn't have a direct sponsor, although we're not opposed to them. It's just that one of the systems that we employ to sort of keep all of the ads to a minimum, make sure that if we ever did get approached by a sponsor, we'd be very picky. Is we have a couple of direct support methods from the audience. Number one, on the front page of Jupiter Broadcasting on the right-hand side, is we have contribute links for an Amazon subscription or PayPal subscriptions if you'd just like to give us a direct contribution every single month if you enjoy some of our content. At the bottom of our website, though, we have the Amazon and the Netflix and the Newegg's and the ThinkGeeks and the Best Buys and Audible and Gamefly links down there, and those are affiliate links. You click those before your shopping session, and a portion of your shopping session gets tagged for Jupiter Broadcasting. And to make things nice and automagical for you, we have browser extensions. We have one for Chrome. You can add that. We have a link down there for that. And we have one for Firefox. You add those to your browser, and they will automatically tag your session when you're shopping. We have even more affiliates listed in there. And for you developers out there, the source code to those extensions is posted up on GitHub. Thanks to Rikai in our chat room. And one real quick plug, something that we just mentioned from time to time on the show because it really fits in pretty great with our audience. And Mr. Dominic there put it on our radar to begin with, and that is Code School, where you learn by doing. You don't have to install any software. You just click, 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 and start going. And if you've been interested in things like many of the technologies we talk about on this here show and you want to learn more, Code School is the way to do it. And they have courses you can take online. They even have some freebies to get you started, like try learning in Git and things like that. And they have all kinds of great seminars that you can follow. Like they have a Try OS seminar, they have Assembling SAS Part 2 seminar coming up that you can tune into. It's a pretty good system. We've had a lot of feedback from our audience members who have tried it out that like it a lot when they're trying to expand their skills. And JavaScript will be a topic today. And guess what, folks? They have several courses right here on JavaScript, which you can go watch. So check out Code School. Although for us to get the credit, you do need to use the link at the bottom of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, so that way they know it came from us. But thank you, everybody who participates in either the donations, that is a huge help, or participates in the affiliate system. And the great thing about that affiliate system, you know what? You can help us out without really impacting your budget. You just go ahead and buy what you're already going to buy, and some of that just goes to us. So it's awesome. All right, sir. I'm all done plugging. Is it time to move on to our big topic for the week?
I think we can.
All right. So what is the hoopla?
So first on my list is the National Council of Examiners for Engineering and Surveying, haha, say that 6 times fast, has introduced now I should say these people, this organization is, how could we say, a body that licenses people who work in infrastructure.
Okay.
So think your architects, your surveyors, your civil engineers, folks like that.
All right.
They've introduced a software engineering exam. Now, I find this interesting because no one can agree on what makes a good software developer anyway. So having some sort of standardized exam intrigued me.
Right.
So I checked out the test. It's curious because there's no coding questions.
Oh, really?
It's all about what might be called very traditional waterfall style process. Further, it's an open book exam.
Huh.
So it's interesting. And perhaps it makes sense if you're working on infrastructure, power plants, things like that. But it's not really a technical, like if you go to their website and look at the curriculum, it's not a technical exam.
Not at all.
Now, there are all kinds of coding exams, right? So, Oracle does the Java ones. Microsoft has 8,000 different certifications you can get.
Yeah.
But they all tend to be, code related, and they kind of make sense. This one is odd. I only mention it because, it brings up the question, do we need something like this? And I would say no, because we're never going to be able to decide what exactly a developer should know. At least we're not going to be able to agree. For instance, some folks think you need to know C in assembly. Other folks don't think so.
It seems like it's always going to be job specific.
Right. Additionally, I feel like too many of these licensing things, one of the great things about this industry is that anybody who got a computer when they were a kid can get into it. And it's actually a pretty egalitarian industry. Credentials don't matter in most companies. This kind of thing is just another barrier to entry. And again, people now.
I think it's the result of bureaucracies needing a way to vet out people and isolate from risk and things like that. I think that's what drives this type of stuff.
For sure. And it's a license. You take this exam, you get a license. Presumably, like an engineer screws up, they can take his license. Presumably, they can take your license. And, the nice thing is I'm pretty confident that anyone who listens to this show would pass this exam blind. Though I'm not sure that it really, they say the reason is to regulate software engineering for these fields to make sure it's safe, right? So your mission critical software is safe, yet they don't ask about any kind of code or any kind of security questions.
Gosh, that is really strange.
Yeah, it seems a very process-oriented exam. And maybe that is a real problem, and I just don't have the background
But this would be something like they would expect. So, like, in order to work in certain fields, you would need to pass this exam.
That's what this organization is hoping, right? It hasn't happened. This is brand new.
Brand new, yeah.
So this is not a standard anywhere. But, you know, given their track record, I'm sure they will get some traction. I mean, if anything, it's a way for, you know, when you're writing your human resource algorithm to filter folks out. Oh, don't have the certification.
Well, if I was to put on my future man hat, I would say this type of thing is really going to start coming up a lot more. I don't know if you catch a lot of the rhetoric around infrastructure devices and how insecure they are, and how
right.
I mean, there's this huge push to start holding developers liable for these types of mistakes. There's an effort underway to have certified development practices that, you know, so that we can say this device has been developed under these practices and we can certify it as secure. And all of this stuff is just adding cruft and bureaucracy and barriers to entry to getting to all this, to, you know, a whole other level of devices. And I think, unfortunately, the future just holds a lot more of this type of stuff.
I think so too. In the infrastructure space, I don't think it would succeed outside of that space.
Maybe, but couldn't you see it eventually creeping into mobile, that same thought process?
No,
because
it
these
won't.
devices are with us. These devices have GPS and microphones and cameras, and if they have sloppy code, they can.
They change too fast.
Yeah, that's true.
By the time you wrote the great example,
yeah,
there was one point where I was considering taking Oracle's Java exam, or back then Sun's Java exam, and I didn't, only because I realized I haven't written any Java code that's not like Android. And I said, you know, if you're a developer and you're not just working for a large corporation, or even if you are, you're probably going to have to change or learn new things as you go on, right?
But don't you think the reason why this PE exam is sort of non-technical is so that way you can stay sort of technology agnostic and the technology can change? And that's
for sure, because if they did it in like C,
yeah,
it would be an outrage. But some people would feel it's an outrage, I should say. My assertion would be that since it's non-technical, how does it do what it hopes to do, right? How does it accomplish anything?
Right, it just helps people.
And maybe the answer is that informing developers of these processes and enforcing them is the solution. And if that's the case, then that's the case.
Yeah, maybe.
You know, I don't know that you need an exam for that.
Maybe it's also just a warm blanket that people who don't understand what they're managing can wrap themselves with.
Yeah, and maybe, honestly, I read the exam, I'm like, these are companies I don't want to work for.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving along. So Windows Phone 8, my favorite mobile platform. They're not being too nice, though.
No, I've heard a lot of developers are pretty grumpy about how Microsoft's handling the release of the Windows Phone 8 SDK.
They're pulling an Apple, but even worse, they're giving it to select developers who apply.
Right, which then, of course, means it gets leaked out online, so people get to see it anyways.
We'll see it anyway, but supposedly they're trying to hide some, you know, great functionality that they want to, I guess, own the tech press the day the phones are launched.
Yeah, right, because Microsoft's so good at that.
Well, that's what they say. They say because the simulators would show never revealed functionality.
But people are saying they've gone through the simulators and there's not really anything big that hasn't been seen before.
Yeah. So I don't either way, here's what's happened. Here's what's going to happen, I mean. Unless you're a select developer, you don't have the Windows Phone 8 SDK, which means your app is going to essentially be a Windows Phone 7 app. Which means it's not going to take advantage of some of the new APIs, the better functionality, et cetera, et cetera. Bottom line, it's not great for the platform at launch to not have really optimized, really platform-specific apps.
No, in fact, I'd say that's a huge misstep because every new Apple device usually ships with a featured section in the App Store of all of the apps that have updated to take advantage of whatever new whiz-bang feature that device has.
I mean, Apple's obsessively secretive, and they give developers the new SDK about 3 to 6 months in advance. Ish.
Except for with the iPhone 5, right? They didn't really.
They don't give you devices. They don't tell you anything about that's maybe the difference. Apple's a hardware company at its core.
Yeah,
so they're less worried about covering up their software and more worried about covering up the hardware.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I would think the SDK, you know,
maybe that's what it is. Maybe Microsoft's trying to let their partners wow people.
Here's the
know.
problem. they're going out of their way to woo developers away from iOS, away from Android, and then they're doing stuff like this, which these are the exact type of things that people rebel against Apple for.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, independent developers such as myself make a lot more money with Apple than anybody else.
So the issue here would be too is as you're watching this platform, you're thinking, man, I'd love to unhitch a little more from Apple. I'd love for Microsoft to get in here and just shake things up and keep things competitive. But from watching this, are you still feeling kind of bullish about developing for this platform, or are you?
I'm less bullish, right? Because Apple certainly can be a bit capricious in their guidelines, but they're very open about it. Their basic position could be summed up: if it doesn't look pretty enough and we don't like it, we're rejecting it. And really, it's funny, they will admit apps that crash at launch, but they will reject apps that use the wrong back button icon, or back button shape, I should say.
Who, Microsoft?
Apple.
Oh.
So they're very clear what their position is. It must look pretty.
Yeah.
The RUI guidelines.
Right.
Which is obnoxious, but once you just get used to it and deal with it, it's very rare for me to see a rejection unless a client, overrules some of my design objections.
Watching the Windows 8 UI, it's really just text and small SVG black and white icons. And
yeah, they're the anti-Apple in design, but I think that's going to change.
I'm just saying they should have the result of this is they better have the best performing UI out of any smartphone out there, because they definitely have the simplest UI to render.
Yeah, I don't know. In a lot of ways, I feel like this is undoing a lot of the goodwill they've gained with a subset of the mobile community, who perhaps feel a bit manipulated and pushed around by Apple. But this is exactly the behavior that people rage about. So we'll see. I mean, maybe there is something so big that it's amazing, and that we're like, okay, that's why they kept it secret.
If there is, it's not in the SDK.
Right, and I don't think there is. I think this was just a weird move.
It is, yeah. I mean, the entire SDK has been picked through now, and there's nothing that people didn't know about so far.
I mean, I've noticed this trend even with smaller companies. Every company wants to do the secretive thing, but it doesn't work. I mean, certainly there is a value to being secretive, right? And for certain things. But being secretive against your own developers that are going to boost your platform, that's risky.
It's rookie hours, what it is.
Well, it's very anti-Microsoft too. They don't normally do this. This is something way out of their playbook.
So the phone launches on the 29th, and that's when they're also launching. They're not even launching the SDK. They're not making it publicly available until the phone's out.
Right.
So people can't even start writing applications until the hardware ships.
Yeah, and the company line is that, well, the Windows 7 Silverlight SDK still works, but you're deprecating Silverlight, so it works, but it's deprecated.
Well, they won't be. Yeah. Oh boy.
So it's, I'm sure Rovio has the SDK. I mean, let's be realistic.
Yeah,
for sure. Evernote has it, I'm sure.
Right.
But that kind of favoritism is.
I agree with RenX. To me, what it smacks of is it's half baked. In fact, the first time I heard this story a couple of weeks ago, when I first heard people bitching about it, and I was like, what are they getting all upset about? And I kind of read into it, and I was like, oh, it just must not be ready yet. That was it's probably not production quality, and they don't want that getting out there.
Playing devil's advocate for just a moment is that Microsoft does intend to be more open with their App Store and less restrictive than Apple. But at launch, they only want to have top-tier apps that people know and that are really good. So they're trying to avoid, the crap, the fart apps, all that kind of stuff.
But they're still going to have the entire Windows Phone 7 catalog in there, right? So it's still going to be a bunch of crap apps.
There's not that many apps on Windows Phone 7.
Oh, okay.
I think there's like 100,000, that's it. So I wouldn't be surprised if you buy your Lumia 920, launch it, and the suggested apps are Evernote, Angry Birds, Cut the Rope, and Spotify.
Yay, apps I could already get everywhere else.
Right, and I think that's what they're going for. It's not that I don't really believe the hiding a future line. I think it's more, we want a higher concentration of big name apps to launch to be more impressive.
Yeah.
Which, if that's the case, that's essentially sacrificing the developers for the platform, which is a classic Apple play, and Google does it too all the time. So it's not unusual, but it does undermine their whole line of, we're the nice, kinder, gentler ecosystem.
Well, and it's also, I mean, don't you think it means the SDK probably won't be quite as well flushed out? It might seem a little beta still.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with the SDK, to be honest with you. I think the SDK has been done.
I don't know. I mean, just by their very nature, it means less people have tested it. It hasn't gone through a proper beta period or anything like that. It's been...
Yeah, maybe. I think, though... See, I listed 5 apps, but I think a lot of developers do have it. I just think it's either the ones who had pushed something onto Windows Phone 7 or who are big enough that they're willing to get them in early.
I think you're totally right.
Yeah, I would be surprised if the SDK is unstable or anything like that.
We will see, won't we?
We will.
On October 29th.
All right, so more news from Redmond, because apparently they decided to destroy Reddit this week. They released TypeScript.
Yes. Yes. TypeScript. What is TypeScript?
TypeScript is a compiled to JavaScript programming language that adds static typing and classes and a bunch of other things people have been clamoring for. It was designed by the designer of C#, so it does have some heavy hitters behind it. And according to their release notes, there is a team of 50 working on it at Microsoft. Interestingly, it's open source, and I believe it may be Apache licensed. So that's another unusual move.
TypeScript is developed on CodePlex. The TypeScript compiler is implemented in TypeScript and can be used in any JavaScript. Oh, they don't say the license there, though. That's very interesting. Look at Microsoft Go.
So, and there's a nice video, and you can watch it. Now, this has been a terribly divisive issue. I wrote a blog post about it. Not really for or against TypeScript, just saying, there is a problem in the JavaScript space, in my opinion. Yay, my pretty Android theme. And the reason that Microsoft has TypeScript, Google has Dart, Apple hippies have CoffeeScript. I love you people, sorry. And what's the third one? Script, the C# one. Is because, well, should we get into it already, or should we hold off?
No, absolutely, unless there's something else you want to cover.
So, no, I think we're good.
Okay.
Okay, there are 2 arguments for the, quote, problem with JavaScript.
All right.
And these aren't necessarily my opinions. I'm just going to summarize the arguments. First one is the language itself. That it doesn't have classical inheritance. When I say classical, I mean JavaScript. I mean Java, C++ style inheritance. Or that it's too loose, and too loose meaning it's not statically typed, unless you do crazy things. Okay, that's one argument, right? The second argument is the opposite. There's nothing wrong with JavaScript. It's a great language, and developers are just too lazy to learn it because they're stuck in their old way of thinking, Java, C#, whatever. Or that if the problem is that there's a bunch of code on the web that's already so sloppy that it's just hard to scale that code and it needs to be rewritten. Basically, the second point is laying the blame at developers. Okay. Now, this is a very divisive issue. My post got on Reddit, and 2 folks in there had a rather vicious argument. So I'm going to tread a little lightly here. The argument I made was that it doesn't matter. Let's play devil's advocate and say there's nothing wrong with the language, which I do believe, and that the issue is developers are just, the vast majority of them were taught Java. They understand classical inheritance, that's all they really know, so they write crap JavaScript. I used to be, and not so long ago, we had an episode called JavaScript is not assembly. I was very much just learn JavaScript. Having spent the last few months maintaining horrible JavaScript, and doing that for fairly frequently, I feel like it's a lost cause at this point. I feel like there's such a large portion of developers and software engineers, programmers, whatever name you prefer, that are so into that Java classical inheritance mindset that JavaScript just isn't something they're going to get, at least not to develop large-scale applications, at least not correctly. So I proposed that rather than abstracting it away, like Dart, well, less so Dart, but like TypeScript proposes to do, or SharpScript or GWT, or any of these compile to solutions, that it simply be replaced by something classical, class-based, Java-style object orientation. But I know this is an unpopular opinion, and I understand that there are definitely reasons that that wouldn't be great from a technical perspective. Chris, my problem is that, it's great to be right and to feel superior. Ooh, I can do proper JavaScript. However, it sucks to know that no one can really help me, or that there's the few, the proud, the JavaScript elite.
Mm.
And I understand their point of view. And I have to say, when Objective-C got ARC, the automatic reference counting, I had the same knee-jerk, well, if this is made easier, I'm going to have to compete with all these overseas or all these Java developers.
Oh, interesting.
I can tell you from experience, they still write crap code.
Yeah.
Like the people who couldn't do memory management without reference counting, without automatic reference counting, don't even understand automatic reference counting.
So is that
don't worry.
Is that what TypeScript aims to do? Is make JavaScript easier?
Yes, in a nutshell, right? The problem, I mean, this is all debatable, and this is going to start a flame war. Is it's really great to get on a pulpit and say we'll only hire the best developers. If they should have to learn JavaScript, it's not that hard. And that may be true for your team, but one day you're going to change jobs, or you're going to inherit a project. And if the person you're inheriting it from didn't really understand JavaScript, it's going to be terrible. And I don't think that TypeScript is the solution. Just like I don't think CoffeeScript is a real solution, because they compile to JavaScript. The closest thing to me is Dart, because it does compile to JavaScript, but alternatively, if the browser supports the Dart VM, it runs like that in the VM.
Interesting. Okay.
It's not 100% what I would like, but I think it's close enough to Java that these developers will stop breaking stuff. And my whole thing is, when I wrote the article, I got accused of not knowing JavaScript. That's the only reason you would be against it. I've written a lot of JavaScript. I think it's fairly good. I would say I'm a decent JavaScript developer. And I don't mind working in it. I'm just tired of trying to force the issue, of trying to, I'm tired of the Skype calls, trying to explain prototypical inheritance versus classical inheritance. I'm tired of trying to explain scope. It's a mess. I mean, it's not, I don't think it's the language's fault, really. I mean, yes, it's being asked to do things it wasn't really designed to do. And yes, certain vendors and certain browsers have warped it to hell. But, and Grey Wolf is saying, well, just have them read eloquent JavaScript. I've done that. And I still end up with crap. I mean, bottom line is I still have to deal with this, and are we going to be able to change these thousands upon tens of thousands, possibly, I don't know how many programmers there are in the world, but are we really going to be able to get them all to learn how to do this properly? Because remember, the internet's not shrinking.
Right.
We're writing JavaScript at an alarming rate.
Yeah.
And I would say the majority of it's very, very bad.
It seems like if it was possible, it wouldn't have already started to happen. I mean, it seems like the very fact that it's still happening would prove that we're screwed. I
would think so. When I say bad, I want to be totally clear to people who work in different spaces. I don't mean, oh, gee, this guy, the method name doesn't make sense and he didn't document his code. How annoying. I had to step through to do it. I mean bad, as in it doesn't work. I mean, like, awfully broken, not readable, horrible, possible security risk. I'm talking, like, apocalyptic bad here. I'm not saying, oh, gee, I have to maintain this crap. Oh, there might be a memory leak. Which is also bad. This is like, pour yourself a beer and a bourbon and cry. And maybe maybe I just need to stop inheriting these projects.
Yeah, well, I hear you on that.
Email that says, dude, you've just had bad luck.
Yeah, the problem is that's where the money is sometimes, and that's where the work is, right? I mean, that's...
I can tell you, Chris, I've had so many calls for web projects be like, listen, we had this guy, and just didn't work out. Like, oh, dear.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how and it's funny how those guys that don't work out always kind of were the ones that do that had that kind of behavior, right?
Right, and I don't mean to suggest and Grey Wolf is pointing it out because he's always fact checking me, which is good. to be fair, and he's right, JavaScript is fairly strange compared to Java and C#. So it is understandable that a lot of developers would have a problem with it. And I'm not trying to insult them. If you have a problem with it, I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm saying, if there's, 1% of us who can do this and who understand this, and I had to read a lot of books. I used to write crap JavaScript. I had to spend a lot of time studying to do it. So it's not an easy road. But the other 99%, it's 2% of us, and the 98% who can't, because I refuse to use 1 in 99. Why not cater to the 98% instead of the 2? I mean, do we really need this red badge of courage?
But isn't this just like every other field? Like, I mean, my field's full of bad sysadmins that deploy Apache servers horribly insecure and get hacked, and, Drupal installations that they haven't updated modules in 16 months. And, I mean, doesn't every industry just have people who are just bad at the job?
Yes, there are bad programmers. I mean, I can't deny that there are. The problem is that, you have a bad C# developer, you fire him, you get a new one. It's really hard, at least my experience in the JavaScript space, to fire guy A, get guy or girl B, and have them not also be horrible. And I'm not one of the JavaScript elite hipster guys who goes nuts about little things. I'm talking serious issues here. Right? I don't have my hand on JavaScript, the good parts like the Bible, and I'm not looking at these people. But things don't work, when things don't get done, or when they hand me something back that's spaghetti code and awful.
And it's like person after person.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't enjoy telling a client that they should have a sit down with their employee.
Yeah.
And because first of all, and this may be your experience with contracting, you go in, a lot of people tend to have their egos bruised, especially if you're doing what was effectively their job.
Right.
And for these web projects, I'm only ever called in to do that.
Right.
And sometimes they make the person pair with me, and it's really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't want, because you're there signals their failure. You're being there signals their failure.
When they ask me to do a code review and it's all bad, and I can't lie to my client.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, I don't want to bury this person.
And in a lot of times, you need that person's cooperation in order to be successful and deliver what the client's asked of you.
And cooperation.
Yeah.
I've also screwed up. I've been on the other side of that code review.
Oh, yeah, that sucks.
I've been the guy getting the talking.
Yeah, that's rough.
Some time ago, but it was one of the early adventures in my career. I don't want to be on either side of that. And I took pains after that experience to really get better. But listen, it's a shame. I mean, maybe I am being too much of a humanitarian on this one, because I feel like this is creating churn, and this is creating first of all, bad code. Second of all, I think a lot of people are starting to lose their jobs over this. At least, again, it might be my bias. We talked about it last week, that I'm only ever called in when things have gone terribly bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm at DEFCON 1 all the time. But Chris, I'd really be interested in your thoughts on that second point. That perhaps, being called in as a specialist or as an auxiliary asset, the effect that might have on the employees who you're effectively replacing for a short time.
Yeah, isn't that an interesting thing? And I spent some time as a security auditor, right? And so, can you imagine when you come into a place full of proud IT organization, a department of maybe 15 people or something like that, and you're coming in and you're telling them what in-house applications they've developed have security flaws. You're telling them what server setups they've done that they've misconfigured. I mean, can you imagine what kind of awkward situation that creates? And it's very challenging, because you essentially have to tell them, you have to tell the people that have hired you what they've done wrong. Or what, right. Or not necessarily not the people who've hired you directly, but the people you're working with who've hired you, what they've done wrong.
Your ears.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very uncomfortable, at least because in my experience, it's not been just reporting to the manager. It's been in a meeting, standing up, and essentially as gently as possible dressing a few people down.
You know what I do? You know how I approach it is I just approach it as like, look, you know what? This stuff happens everywhere. Nothing to really be that embarrassed about because we've identified what the issue is and now we just have to fix it. And it's not like you're the first person that's ever made this mistake and you're not going to be the last.
Yeah, I mean, and it is true. To be fair, especially on the JavaScript issue, the web is moving at a honestly, an unbelievable pace.
Yeah, for sure.
So what might have been okay a year ago is, horrible today. And I do tell people that, but yeah, maybe I am too much of a hippie, but why not cater to all these developers and make it easier on everybody?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I understand we're not going to get all the browser manufacturers to do this.
So are you kind of speaking then in favor of something like TypeScript?
No, not TypeScript. Okay, here's the problem with TypeScript. It's the same problem I had with CoffeeScript. You write your TypeScript, everything's beautiful, you enjoy it. Something doesn't work, you then have to debug JavaScript.
Oh, and if you're just weak in that area, then you're kind of screwed.
Right. So my opinion, and this is an opinion, so I'm not saying this is fact, is that never solve a weak point in your knowledge with an abstraction. Right? Because essentially that's what that's doing. That's abstracting JavaScript away.
Yeah. Interesting. So the problem really is developers. It really is. It really is. The problem is developers, isn't it? Just like in my field, misconfigured Apache servers, the problem really is the sysadmins. It's not Apache.
Joel Spolsky several years ago wrote an article called Java Schools. The problem could be the schools who only teach one type of software development. And I don't have the experience in an academic setting to say if that's true or not. I've heard the stories. I can't agree. I mean, not that I disagree, but I can't swear to it. I can certainly say that if you're in a computer science or a software engineering program and if you only learned one programming language and you spent 4 years doing so, all the math in the world is not going to help you.
Yeah.
So, in my limited experience, again, I may be wrong, and there may be a school somewhere that does teach this stuff and does teach more than 1 or 2 languages. But I know we have lots of students listening. If you're very good at Java or C# or BASIC, that's awesome. Learn something radically different like JavaScript or Haskell, a la Charles, or Ruby or Python or something else.
I believe you'd recommend Ruby.
Less and less. Well, no, because for their careers, right? Ruby was hot and is starting to fall a bit.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
So by the time they graduate, Ruby won't be the hotness. I think the functional paradigm is going to be hot if you're a back-end guy. So maybe Scala, F#, but that's a gamble. Still, it teaches you a new way to think, and it's radically different from Java.
Right.
And I have nothing against the Java programming language.
Yeah.
I'm just suggesting that you're going to be asked to do a lot more than Java, especially if you want to make more money or advance your career at a rapid rate. So it might be good to learn some other paradigms.
Well put, and if people have thoughts on this, they can email the show, coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or hit the contact link at the top of Jupiter Broadcasting's website. Should we jump to the tool, or what do you think?
Tool of the week, it's CodeJournal.
CodeJournal! Actually, you haven't plugged CodeJournal on the show for a while.
I'll plug it today.
But you have in the show notes, you have TypeScript as the tool of the week.
Changed my mind.
I thought you're just being a jokester. CodeJournal. Tell us about what is CodeJournal? Never heard of this. Brand new.
CodeJournal is a Mac OS 10. I know. Welcome to the Mac OS 10 hour again.
Oh, we did it.
It's a GitHub client, but I realize when I say that, people get a bit confused. They think of the GitHub push pull commit style client. This is more a code snippet and issue tracking client. So if you're running Mountain Lion, which you should be if you're running a Mac, it gives you the great desktop notification functionality that's native in the OS to notify you of when, let's say, your boss, who's a PM, who somehow learned how to use GitHub, and that's your fault, decided to open an issue. When the QA team decided to open an issue and flame you on it.
That's a nice feature.
Yes. Perhaps when you have a code snippet and perhaps you're a senior developer and you're trying to teach someone, why not put it as a gist or a gist? I'm not sure which is correct. You can get comments on it. You can post it right from here. Now, so there's a little bit of a catch. if you buy it from the website, you're going to get a different version than if you had purchased it from the App Store.
What?
Yes. The reason for that is, there's always bug fixes and there's always additional functionality. The App Store has been taking me 20 plus days per version to review and have posted. Now, I'll give you an example. The current version on the website is version 1.2.2. So it's a point release. It's a .2, right? App Store is, I think, 1.2.1.
Okay.
So you have to make a trade.
Apple!
Right. And it's a personal preference because they're going to be in line with each other for the most part, unless Apple somehow, tells me I can't interact with GitHub. Do you want faster updates, but perhaps not the convenience of updating via the App Store? Now, to be clear, direct purchases are updated via email, and as long as you don't put me in your spam filter, you'll get the email. And I don't spam. Or do you want the automatic App Store updates? It's totally up to you. Chris, additionally, I'm really happy to say that I've just added functionality for GitHub Enterprise users.
Oh, very nice. That's a great idea, dude.
Folks who are using perhaps their own servers with GitHub. Now, you have to be using GitHub v3 because they won't let me do anything lower. I think they're trying to push people up. But I'm told that the odds of you using anything other than GitHub API version 3 is pretty much nil.
I love this, though. If I was an enterprise and I had the internal server, I would love to have a nice client front end like this to it.
Right. And again, on the enterprise side, if you have some kind of crazy firewall or some kind of weird settings, I can't guarantee that you won't need support, but I am happy to support you.
And you got more stuff planned, don't you?
There is additional functionality coming down the pike. In fact, I just finished last night another update. Actually, this might be 0.1. I think what I did last night was 0.2. Might be wrong. That's some performance enhancements. Users on older, more frightening versions of Lion were having some performance issues logging in. Those have been resolved. A few minor UX tweaks. But we have the next, not this, so this next update you're going to see if you're on the App Store is the one that's on the website. After that is a pure performance update. Then after that is another feature update. Again, if you're on the App Store, you've probably got like 60 days to go before you see it. Because
womp womp. But you know what? People like their tools, and I think people who use software as tools, in some cases, don't actually mind waiting.
To be honest, I'm running the App Store version only because I have so many binaries of this compiled on my machine. So I have a whole folder directory of each build. Yeah. I just save them. The one that's in my, because you can launch via shortcut any app from the App Store. It's little power user thing, but yeah, I would definitely suggest you check it out. And I have another project just got kicked off for all you bloggers out there.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
What is it?
Not telling you.
Oh, really? We have to wait to find out?
I did use the code Linux 599 or 599 Linux.
Oh, you got yourself a .com, huh? For $5.99.
Several of them, because you need a couple. Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait to find out what it is.
I'm hoping to get this out. Well, again, when I say out, I mean done, and God knows how long it takes to actually get into the wild.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, while we wait for that announcement, maybe we should read something.
Yes. So, I have a listener-recommended book from Margaret Charles.
All right. For our book of the week.
For folks looking to learn, I guess, Haskell, things like that. Out of my wheelhouse, I haven't read it.
The basic category theory for computer scientists, the foundations of computing, paperback edition. That's pretty hardcore. That looks like something that, yeah.
That is a bit hardcore. Yeah.
It does kind of fit with our conversation we had earlier today.
I think it does. He definitely he gave me a rave review of it via email, so I felt like it was worth mentioning.
Oh, well, there you go. So we'll have a link to that in the show notes, and if you grab that, it will support the show. It's an affiliate link, so a little portion gets sent back to us.
My CodeJournal.
Yeah, and go get yourself CodeJournal. What are you doing? What are you doing? I got to say, your website has some subtle complexity to it. I never noticed that the feature specs scroll independently of the image. That's pretty nice. That's pretty fancy.
JavaScript.
That's what I was going to say. Look at you using JavaScript, huh?
Exactly.
Well, I think that wraps us up, yeah? I think we're all done. Jeez, so where should people follow you throughout the week?
They should follow me on Google+, Twitter, or app.net.
There you go. We'll have links to those at the bottom of the show notes, as well as links to my social profiles. Now, the show is live on Mondays, so you can join us live Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific, which is noon Eastern at jblive.tv. Thank you to everyone in the chat room who showed up this week to join us and been chatting right along. You guys starred in the video version of our show. And thank you to everyone who participates in our affiliate program and helps keep these shows on the air. Now, be sure to tune right back here next week for an all-new edition of Coder Radio. Thanks, everybody.